What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today I am joined by the very recent Portland regional champion, Michael Davidson. So he won Portland with Gardevoir. Today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the new Destined Rivals meta and new decks moving into NAIC and how Gardevoir looks going into that as well. Michael, what's up, man? Why don't you introduce yourself for the audience?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm Michael Davidson. Like you said, I just won Portland in a same 60 card mirror against Henry Chow in the finals, and I've had a couple other good placements this year. A lot with Gardevoir. I had a asymmetrical top cut in Toronto with Gardy, and also a top cut at the Merida Regional Championships. And overall, just I've been having a much better season this year than I had in my first year in Masters.
Awesome. So I was just about to ask that, second year in Masters now. So what factors went into choosing the TM Evo Guardy instead of the Brent Tonneson, the Brixty with the 3 candy for Portland?
Yeah, well, we had been playing the Brent list a fair amount, and when against like very competent or very skilled Dustin or Polt players, the matchup did not feel great. Like, we were pretty consistently losing to a Bond and Andrew, and we felt like we needed to either, like, we couldn't play Guardy because of that, or we needed to like find some new innovation. And like, thankfully for us, the Brazilian TM Evo list got not leaked, but like they played it and did very well with it at the Santiago Regional Championships.
Yep.
And we started with their base list, and it was definitely a very like improved not necessarily improved, but the concept felt really good, and it felt like a really good baseline. But we felt like we could focus more on maybe less Arvins but more draw supporters, because I mean, those are like more consistently powerful throughout the games, and buffing up the Evo count to still give us like pretty good outs to find Evo even without Arvin. I think we cut back on the ball search a little bit, but that like let us. I mean, we still had like 4 Ultra Ball, triple Vessel. We had like all these supporters, so our deck still felt like very consistent, but just was also a little bit less item reliant. And also, like, compared to Guardy builds in the past, you obviously don't need to get as wide of a board initially with this deck, so we felt pretty comfortable doing that. And then what like really tied the Evo together is when we added the Rabska. It was like really space efficient. It's a 1/1 line that probably increases your win percentage by like 20% in a wide array of matchups. And I mean, that was pretty evident for us at Portland, and especially against like those Noctowl decks. The Rabska is really good against Polt. A board of like Guardy, Curlia, and Rabska is like nearly unbeatable. Especially for like straight Polt if you don't have like 2 prize liabilities in play.
Absolutely.
But even for Dusk Polt, it's pushing it a little bit. And the only like really significant matchup that it doesn't help in is Goldango. But that matchup, I mean, for the Brent list, Goldango is a pretty fine matchup. But for most other Guardy lists, it's already a bit of a rough one, so we were completely okay with that. And we also knew that Goldango is probably going to be played less this event, and I guess Rabska also doesn't help versus Joltik box, but we felt pretty comfortable into that either way.
Right, right. So with Goldango, do you also think that not running a Badoo in your list was part of feeling a little iffy into the Goldango matchup?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely doesn't improve anything. Usually the Badoo doesn't like actually slow them down that much. It does give you like some win cons later in the game with like Badoo Charm, if they've like drawn a lot of cards and maybe they like knocked out an initial Badoo, knocked out a Guardy, and then you can like try to Badoo Charm and stretch them for their energies. But other than that, from my experience, like with them all playing jamming now, like you have to like get a Drifloon KO after they've only taken like 1 prize, and then hope that they use their jamming and that you can still get to like a recoverable spot. But if they can go like jamming, knock out your Drifloon and kill the Guardy that turn, it gets like really difficult, and that's like not too difficult for them to do. So Yeah, I don't know. The matchup's just like not great. They're pretty efficient into like trading on your two prizers, and they have jamming, so even your one prizers aren't really safe. So definitely just like not an optimal matchup in terms of how Guardy is built in general, and then with our list that's like even less, not less aggressive because we're still aggressive like getting our evolutions in play, but
Right.
Brent's list is definitely a little bit better at slowing them down and still getting your evolutions in play. So
Absolutely.
for specifically Goldenga is, yeah, it's definitely worse.
Yeah, and like you said, it looked like a good weekend to have a bad Goldingo matchup because Goldingo had been falling and falling. So, obviously that worked out for you guys. Like you said, the Rapska shored up a lot of matchups. It felt like there wasn't any bad matchups almost for the deck other than Dengo, which wasn't really that prevalent. And then it was pretty crazy that you and Henry got exactly first and second with the same 60. So, moving on to the next question, what are the new decks you respect going into NAIC? Doesn't have to be made up of new cards, but any decks that are new. Could even be like the Toad Scroll deck that came out at Portland. So yeah, any new decks that you're respecting.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one is obviously Grimmsnarl. I think people are still yet to find like the perfect way to play it, or maybe a variant that like provides a really significant advantage. But I think like by NAIC, people will have found like a pretty good list if they're really like putting time and effort into it. And I think like that can be a really problematic matchup for Guardy. I don't think it's like unwinnable, but depending on how either deck is built, there's definitely like some issues there. And then I do think like it's probably not gonna be like a higher tier deck, but I think like the Ethan's deck is actually like pretty competent, and it definitely can win games.
Yeah, there's
I mean,
something
I don't,
there. There's
yeah,
something there.
compared to at least like all the single prize decks that like we've had recently, the Ethan's deck definitely has a little more going for it.
Yeah, for sure. Like the consistency, at least, like the functionality, at least, is nice. Um, for the Quilava, and then having a one energy attack. So yeah, I could definitely see that being something that's that pops up a little bit. Like you said, I don't think it's crazy, but it's functional. Any opinions on the Toad Scroll deck from Portland? Do you think that was just like a one-time thing? Do you think that could move forward as a tier 2 archetype?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why it couldn't necessarily move forward as a tier 2 archetype. I mean, especially if Grimmsnarl gets more popular, it should be pretty good into that. The numbers are pretty awkward for Grimmsnarl, and you trade pretty well into them. You don't have like a lot of like low HP ability liabilities, so even like their frost lasses aren't doing too much. So yeah, I mean, I do think it could stay relevant, and especially if something like Zard or Zoroark stays relevant, although Zoroark is probably gonna have a difficult time. But if those like weakness relevant matchups stay relevant, I don't see why the Toadstool deck can't still see a little bit of play.
Next question. How does the format or the meta change going into Destined Rivals?
I mean, I think the biggest additions to the format are Shaman and Grimmsnarl, and with Grimmsnarl, we have to like wait a little bit to see its immediate impact on the meta. But I mean, with Shaman, we can pretty easily tell that like obviously a lot of decks won't play Shaman, and some decks that like maybe would play Shaman or could be relying on like other people to play Shaman to cancel out some of those matchups where Shaman would be relevant. But I think the like Terrorbox and Zoroark are probably going to see a much lower meta share because it's pretty risky for a core strategy of your deck to be countered by one card, and they definitely profited from Manaphy not being in format, but with Shaman kind of providing a very similar role, it definitely gets a little bit suspect. I mean, the Shaman's not super easy to get out for most decks, but I think if they prioritize it, it's still like worth it to do that than walk into a Wellspring attack or even a Darmanitan. So,
Mhm.
and then with Grimmsnarl, like I said, like we have to wait and see like what maybe the optimal way to play it is. But I think regardless, it'll still be, or like maybe not 10%, but if it's not over 10%, it'll still be in those higher like single digit percentages. So like maybe around 8, and that's definitely a pretty relevant impact on the meta. So if your deck has like a very negative Grimmsnarl matchup, it's definitely pretty scary. And from my experience, like Grimmsnarl is one of those decks that like can find a way against most decks. Like I think that's something we see with like Guardian, Dragapult, and
Mhm.
I think while Grimmsnarl has like less inherent power, like with monkeys and Frostlass and your snipe attack, I think Grimmsnarl can find a route against most decks, and that's something that's a pretty good indicator of a deck's like possible success.
For sure, yeah. And our last question, our last main question here will be: does Gardevoir get better, worse, or stay the same? Why would you play it? Why would you not play it? And is there any reason to go back to Candy Guardy?
Yeah, I think the immediate answer is that at least specifically talking about the Evo Rabska build, which already had favorable matchups against like some of the decks that are going to see less play in the new format. I think it probably gets a little bit worse. I don't exactly know how difficult the Grimmsnarl matchup will be. I do think it is at least a little bit unfavored. And with that, and also Shaman coming out to block your Screamtail in some matchups. I mean, I don't think a lot of the like super relevant one prize sniping matchups will play Shaman, but like for example, Dragapult Dustner, with the Evo build, you were kind of content getting in there early with the Screamtail once you got the Guardian play, or like once you were like satisfied with your board composition. And if they have the Shaman, that's obviously like not as significant as a potential like play. And the Shaman's not like great on their board. Like they can't go like triple Dracloak and like 2 Dustner lines with a Buddy
Right.
inactive. Like they have to make up for one of those with Shaman. But I do think like it's still like very powerful and still like completely worth playing. But I think it does maybe get a little bit worse with the new cards. I mean,
So
a big
would
reason I would.
you do you think you would move away from the Evo build altogether if you're not playing Rabska at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like a decent argument. I do just think like the Evo build is the better build of the deck, and I think decks like Grimmsnarl and Dragapult are still gonna be like less built to be like super item reliant. So the Buddy's not like as important still, and they'll have their own monkey, so you are just like giving them free damage in play.
Right.
Um,
And playing the
so I do
Badoo
think like
kind of makes you feel like you might need third Bravery Charm as well, because then like you need a
yeah.
charm on the Badoo.
Yeah, so I think because of those factors and a couple other things, like the Evo build's still really strong, and it's felt like the best way to play Guardy post rotation for me. So I still think it's strong, but I don't think like the Brentless is bad, and I think if there's less Dragapult, it's actually a little bit better, especially Dragapult Dustner, because that is like the most relevant matchup where you'd be getting Badooed in, and I think your deck can handle it against most other things.
Hmm.
Um, a reason I would still play Guardy is because I mean it's the deck I played the most this season. It's like the deck I'm most comfortable with, and I've seen success with it already. And I think even if you've like just seen success at the local level, I think it some of that success definitely can be transmitted to a larger event. So if it's like a deck you've already been comfortable with, it's still very strong. So that's like a reason why I could definitely still consider playing it. And then why I wouldn't play it is if you're like really scared of Grimmsnarl, or if you like don't have a particularly significant amount of experience with Guardy. I do think it's still like it's not as hard as it was pre-rotation maybe, but it is still pretty difficult, and there's like a lot of easy things that can go wrong, especially if you don't have Turo, which I know the Brent list has the Turo, but a lot of people cut it for the third candy, and I'm a fan of that. And our list didn't play Turo either, so I think like Turo was kind of a crutch to like it could kind of like help you get out of situations where you maybe like overcommitted something or were weak to Gust Trap. And I think like without Turo, that definitely is scarier. And like you have to manage your resources a lot better, and also manage like where you're committing energies to make sure that like even if you have a really good play with like Screamtail, you don't lose by them just chasing around your Screamtail and then not being able to Drifloon.
Right, yeah, that's a really good point about the Turo. And especially with, you know, decks potentially playing Maractus, that Maractus is popping up at Grimmsnarl a lot, and you know, like you said, sometimes you don't even need a retreat lock to mess up a Guardy. Sometimes you could just boss up Guardy, and if they didn't keep enough energies in their discard pile, that's a retreat lock in and of itself without Turo in the deck. I guess we'll talk about that real quick. Would you consider playing Turo moving into NAIC at all? Is that something on your mind at least to maybe put back into the deck?
Yeah, I mean, Turo was one of like we had a Turo in our Evo list for a while, but we cut it when we like shifted to like a more aggressive with like four Ultra Ball, triple Vessel, 4 research. We were like, a lot of time like this Turo might get discarded anyways, and it's so difficult to find when we need it exactly, unless like we have Secret Box. So we did end up cutting it, but it's still like a card we think is like really strong in the deck. We just like didn't feel like it was necessary for our list that weekend, and I think we were mostly right about that.
That makes a lot of sense too with the 4 research, right? Like it's really hard to justify playing a one-of utility supporter with no pal pad.
And Henry does really like the pal pad, but we didn't have like enough like utility supporters that we'd ever have to put back with this build. So yeah, we didn't play the Turo. Another like card, both Turo and Boss were like really strong considerations. Probably our 61st and 62nd card. But in the end, we decided that we would just like rather play more consistency, keep the list a little cleaner, and not have to worry about like discarding our one of that could be relevant later in the game, and then it like has to make us play differently. I guess one cut is like a possible CC for a Boss, but we didn't end up going with that, and I don't think it's like super necessary. But against some of like your more difficult matchups or against better players, they might like really force you onto like a prize trade where Boss is like the only way forward, especially without the Turo, to like maybe be able to like recommit energy somewhere. So that is like a little bit of a thing to worry about, but in the end we were still fine with double CC.
So, still talking about the Evo Guardy list, I think the popular thing, I mean, what I immediately did was you know, okay, this format's over, I'll take Michael and Henry's list and cut 1/1 Rabska, and then I can add Shaman plus another card. And I think a lot of people are doing that. Is that kind of what also went through your head now that Portland's over, going into NAIC? Do you just immediately take out Rabska, put in Shaman, and gain a deck spot?
It's definitely something we've done in some of our initial lists. I mean, I still think Rabska is like very strong, but it is like it does lose a little bit less value because some of those matchups where the bench barrier was like really important are becoming decreased. So it does lose a little, and like obviously you still have that with Shaman. I think like one thing we did was like just as an initial, let's just cut the Rabska for Shaman and a third Curlia so that we still have like more Evo targets. But
that's exactly what I think.
Yeah, but I think like there's like a lot of like reasonable things to put in that slot, and I think like that is a very reasonable cut. I do think like the Shaman is still pretty strong. Like Eevees is looking to be pretty popular, and preventing Angelite is still that was like really important for me at Portland.
Rabska would do that, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And then if like decks are playing Devo, like if Grimmsnarl was playing Devo, it's like pretty easy for them to get your board to like a Devo range. But I mean, at the same time, like they could also just like go through your attackers manually, so maybe that's not like that relevant. But I do think the Rabska still has like pretty good merit, but it definitely does lose a little bit of value, especially when Shaman is like a 1-card tech you can play in its spot.
Right, right. And you also mentioned something, that I think is going through a lot of people's minds who pay attention to meta shifts and, really metagame is that, like, you might not even play Shaman because if everybody else is playing Shaman, you scare away a lot of the reasons that people could play Shaman. But I also do think Shaman is just a really good card in also the Guardian Mirror, blocking Screamtail. So, like, it's not just to chase away the decks that might become niche, like Terrabox and Zoroark. It can also be really helpful there, or benching it plus a Bravery Charm against Grimmsnarl if like their 30 bench snipe can end the game quicker. So yeah, a lot of interesting things to consider for just a few card slots in Guardian moving forward. So let's close out today's video with talking about what you think the decks that have the best chance of winning NAIC are. So right now, we're still a little less than 2 weeks away. Lots of testing and preparating and metagaming to be done. So what do you think if you had to guess the 3 decks that would get exactly first place in the Masters division, what do you think the 3 most likely decks are?
I mean, I think the most likely deck still stays as Guardy. I mean, it's been so successful in this format, and I don't think there's going to be a huge shift. I think probably the second most is still Dragapult, because I think a lot of good players will still be willing to play Dragapult, and they have put a lot of time into it. So
If you had to pick a variant of Dragapult, which one?
I think I would go with Dusknoir as a little bit stronger in this format. And I think at third, for me, it's leaning more towards Grimmsnarl, but I think at third is I would either put Grimmsnarl or Eevee. I think both have a lot of merit in this format, but I think I would lean towards Grimmsnarl at the 3.
Awesome, Michael. Well, do you have any shout outs you want to make before we end the video?
Yeah, shout out Isaiah Bradner and Isaiah Bradner and Henry Chow for us collabing on this list. The Brazilians for making the Portland list, or like the Evo build initially, and my sponsors, Toys Terminal and FCBC Armor.
Awesome. Well, congrats again on winning Portland, man, an amazing accomplishment. And good luck at NAIC. I'll see you there.
Thank you so much, and good luck to you too.
Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.